I think it's pretty egregious what's been happening to us the last few games. A minus 31 free throw discrepancy. And I might be able to understand it if we were just chucking threes, but we're not. We're attacking the rim. And the disrespect right now.
The lights inside the arena hadn't even dimmed yet, but the real damage wasn't done on the scoreboard. It was happening live in front of the press microphones. Everyone expected a typical post-game narrative filled with watered-down excuses and sanitized coach speak after the Indiana Fever suffered a crushing defeat against the Minnesota Lynx. But what transpired next left sports commentators absolutely speechless. As veteran analyst and respected basketball mind, Stephanie White pulled back the curtain and unleashed a surprisingly sharp critique of Caitlin Clark's performance. White didn't just point out a few missed shots. She dissected the star player's body language, turnover struggles, and defensive lapses with surgical precision, leaving fans wondering if a private line had just been crossed in public view. The tension was palpable, and the message was loud and clear. Elite expectations don't come with soft landings. But as the soundbites started flying across social media, people began realizing this wasn't just a simple critique of one bad game. It was the opening salvo in a much larger debate about accountability, immense pressure, and what happens when the biggest spotlight in hoops hits a wall. The build-up to this matchup had been electric, with fans packing the arena to witness two of the most talked-about franchises collide in a game that felt like a playoff preview. Minnesota came in with a clear mission, determined to set a physical tone from the very first whistle and prove that hyped offense means nothing if you can't survive relentless contact. From the moment the ball was tipped, the Lynx executed a defensive scheme that looked less like standard coverage and more like a tactical blitz, designed to trap and confuse Indiana's primary ball handlers. Every time Clark touched the rock, two defenders were already closing in, forcing her to make split-second decisions near the mid-court line while clogging up every potential passing lane. The physical toll was immediate and obvious, as subtle bumps, hand checks, and aggressive ball pokes began to chip away at the Fever's offensive rhythm. Indiana tried to run their set plays, but the timing was completely ruined by Minnesota's continuous pressure, leading to rushed passes and forced looks early in the shot clock. It was clear that Minnesota had done their homework, exposing every single spatial vulnerability in Indiana's transition setup and turning the game into a chaotic scramble. As the quarters ticked away, the frustration on the floor began to reach a boiling point. The physical play down low and along the perimeter left Indiana struggling to execute basic screen-and-roll action, with defenders recovering rapidly and closing down open shooters before they could set their feet. Clark was subjected to constant double teams and aggressive traps near the sideline, forcing her into tough passing lanes where the ball was repeatedly tipped or stolen. Each giveaway seemed to feed directly into Minnesota's transition game, allowing the Lynx to score easy buckets on the opposite end and build a commanding lead that silenced the traveling fans. On several possessions, unforced errors and miscommunications led to visible exasperation, with players throwing hands up in the air and looking toward the bench for answers that just weren't coming. The offensive fluidness that usually defines Indiana's best runs was completely absent, replaced by static isolation plays and desperate long-range attempts that clanged off the rim. The scoreboard reflected a brutal reality, but the real storm was brewing in the press room as reporters prepared to ask the hard questions about how a team with so much firepower could get so thoroughly dismantled on national television. When Stephanie White took her position behind the broadcast desk to analyze what had just taken place, she completely skipped the usual surface-level platitudes and went straight for the cold, hard details. She didn't hold back at all, breaking down specific play sequences where Clark lost focus on defense, allowing her assignment to cut baseline completely unnoticed for easy layups. White highlighted the alarming turnover tally, explicitly stating that no matter how gifted a playmaker is, Throwing away possessions against a seasoned team is an absolute recipe for disaster. She pointed out that when physical pressure gets dialed up to maximum intensity, real leaders cannot afford to complain to officials or let their body language droop while the play is still live behind them. Her commentary didn't feel like random critique. It sounded like a severe coaching intervention broadcast live to hundreds of thousands of viewers. White questioned the spatial awareness on several key possessions, noting that lazy passes across the top of the key are unforgivable errors at this level of professional basketball. The directness of her breakdown caught everyone off guard, instantly sparking heated debates across the sport about whether her critique was accurate analysis or an unnecessary put-down of a developing superstar. The immediate reaction inside basketball circles was one of genuine shock, as it is rare for an analyst of White's stature to deliver such a non-sugar-coated assessment of a marquee athlete. While some analysts try to protect high-profile talents to maintain media access, White chose absolute transparency, insisting that elite talent demands elite discipline every single second on the floor. She stressed that when opponents realize they can break your emotional composure through physical play, they will continue to bully you in every subsequent meeting until you forcefully demonstrate that you can handle the heat. The harshness of her words echoed through post-game shows, with producers replaying her analysis over and over again while highlighting the exact tape sequences she referenced. Viewers watched in real time as White pointed out missed defensive rotations, slow transition retreats, and instances where ball watchers allowed Minnesota perimeter shooters to drain uncontested buckets. It became very obvious that this wasn't just about one loss. It was a public declaration that technical flaws will be ruthlessly exposed whenever you go up against top-tier contenders who don't care about media hype. Beyond the immediate commentary, whispers and rumors began circulating about the internal state of the Indiana locker room following such a tough, high-visibility defeat. Rumors have been floating around for weeks that the overwhelming media circus surrounding the franchise has created a complex psychological environment for both veterans and younger players alike. When every single possession is clip-ready for social media and every mistake gets dissected by millions, maintaining organic chemistry inside the locker room becomes an uphill battle. Sources close to the team suggest that managing expectations, sharing ball distribution, and maintaining team unity under constant public scrutiny has proven far more difficult than anyone anticipated before the season started. Veteran players who are used to traditional team structures are suddenly navigating a landscape where individual performance is hyper-focused on one person, creating underlying tensions that surface whenever adversity strikes on the court. During the game against Minnesota, that tension was visible in the silent huddles, the lack of high fives after missed calls, and the lingering frustration as the lead expanded. The loss didn't just reveal tactical flaws, it exposed the subtle fractures that occur when a group of professional athletes is pushed to the brink by relentless pressure. The debate over how to handle defensive physical contact has become one of the most contentious topics surrounding Clark's entire transition to the pro level. Opposing teams have clearly recognized that taking away her space early, bumping her off her cut paths, and making every catch uncomfortable is the key to frustrating her offensive flow. Minnesota pushed the absolute limits of physical defense, using aggressive hand checks, tight face guarding, and immediate double teams at the top of the key to make sure she never got comfortable. When a player is forced to work that hard just to touch the basketball, exhaustion sets in, leading to short jump shots, rushed decision-making, and defensive lapses on the other end of the floor. Opposing coaches are sharing this film around the league, establishing a universal scouting report on how to make life miserable for Indiana's backcourt. If a team can turn the game into a physical grind rather than a fast-paced shooting display, they significantly increase their chances of coming out on top. The blueprint is officially out there, And until Indiana finds a consistent answer to handle that level of physicality without losing composure, every disciplined defense in the league will continue to copy Minnesota's aggressive approach. Social media erupted into absolute chaos shortly after Stephanie White's comments went viral, with fans and critics going to war in comment sections across the internet. Clark's loyal fan base rushed to her defense, blasting White for what they perceived as an unfair, hypercritical attack on a young player carrying an unprecedented amount of organizational pressure. They pointed out that even veteran superstars have terrible games where turnovers pile up, arguing that putting all the blame on one player's shoulders ignores the broader roster limitations and tactical failures from the coaching staff. Many comments accused media personalities of using Clark's name strictly for engagement, claiming that people generate cheap views by tear-down culture whenever she has a off night. The phrase DMN, unfair, flooded basketball threads, with passionate supporters insisting that a young guard dealing with double teams every night deserves tactical support rather than public call-outs on national television. They argued that the constant moving of goalposts makes it impossible for her to satisfy critics who expect perfection every single time she steps onto the floor. On the flip side, longtime Hoops fans and analytical purists backed Stephanie White's brutal breakdown, maintaining that high-level critique comes with the territory of being a generational figure in sports. They argued that if a player receives historic praise, brand deals, and global attention, they must also accept real accountability when they deliver a flat performance packed with avoidable mistakes. Commentators on sports radio echoed this stance, claiming that treating young superstars with kid gloves actually hinders their overall growth and prevents them from addressing critical weaknesses in their game. They brought up classic examples of legendary players who had to endure intense public criticism early in their careers before finally adjusting their habits and leading teams to championships. In these circles, phrases like soft mentality and zero discipline were tossed around, with users writing that you can't act like a complete superstar during wins and then hide from honest analysis after throwing away the ball 8 times in a blowout loss. The digital landscape was split down the middle, creating a heated back and forth that showed no signs of slowing down, as highlight reels of every single turnover circulated everywhere. When you look past the noise and look directly at the analytical tracking data from the Minnesota game, the root cause of Indiana's breakdown becomes crystal clear. Minnesota executed a textbook drop coverage scheme mixed with high traps, forcing Clark to pass out of double teams into areas where her teammates were unprepared to make fast secondary plays. The data reveals that when Clark is forced into more than 6 turnovers in a game, Indiana's overall offensive efficiency rating plunges to the bottom tier of the league, illustrating how heavily their system relies on clean playmaking. Furthermore, her shooting efficiency off the dribble suffered drastically in the second half, dropping below 30% as physical wear and tear took its toll on her jump shot mechanics. The tracking software also showed multiple late defensive reactions, where opponents scored open three-pointers because perimeter help arrived a half-second too late. These aren't just subjective opinions, they are factual data points that highlight why coaches get so frustrated when high talent is undermined by fundamental execution breakdowns. The numbers proved that Minnesota didn't just win by chance. They thoroughly outplayed and out-schemed Indiana in every critical phase of the game. The tactical nightmare presented by Minnesota isn't an isolated incident. It represents a growing trend that Indiana will have to face for the rest of the season. Elite defensive teams are no longer respecting passive offensive sets. They are actively jumping passing lanes, pressing full court, and forcing Indiana's secondary ball handlers to create off the bounce. When the primary playmaker is denied the ball, the rest of the offense often looks static, standing around waiting for magic to happen rather than cutting hard to the basket or setting solid away screens. This reliance on individual brilliance over structured team ball makes Indiana incredibly vulnerable against disciplined defensive rosters that communicate well on off-ball switches. If the coaching staff doesn't implement dynamic counter schemes, such as running backdoor cuts to punish high pressure or using quick dribble handoffs to free up space, opposing teams will keep using Minnesota's exact defensive script to secure easy victories. Fixing these issues requires intense practice, video study, and an absolute commitment from every single player on the floor to execute their role with intensity and discipline. The psychological toll of living under a perpetual microscope cannot be overstated, especially when every single play is dissected by analysts, fans, and former players globally. Moving from college stardom into the professional ranks presents a massive adjustment, not just in terms of game speed and player physicality, but in how failure is digested by the media landscape. In today's digital era, a bad turn, an exasperated sigh, or a slow jog back on defense is clipped within seconds and amplified to millions of viewers who draw sweeping conclusions about a player's character and work ethic. That constant state of being judged creates an invisible weight that can easily drain an athlete's energy and compromise their joy for the game. You can see it in the post-game press conferences, where guarded responses and tight body language speak louder than any standard answer given to reporters. Carrying the financial, promotional, and cultural weight of an entire league while trying to figure out how to navigate complex pro defenses is a task that would test the sanity of even the most hardened sports legends. The dynamic between elite analysts and rising stars has always been complex, but Stephanie White's commentary brought that relationship into sharp focus under the bright lights of national TV. Former players turned analysts view it as their absolute duty to educate the audience on the game's brutal realities, refusing to tone down their breakdowns just to spare a player's feelings or protect media relationships. They know firsthand that the court does not care about narrative, popularity, or hype. It only rewards discipline, execution, and relentless effort over 40 minutes. When an analyst like White sees repeated mistakes that could easily be fixed with better focus and preparation, her frustration stems from a place of respect for the game's highest standards. She understands that if Clark wants to ascend from a gifted creator into a true championship champion, she must embrace these hard truths, fix her defensive awareness, and learn how to remain poised when opponents try to turn games into street fights. It is a form of tough love that can feel harsh to the public, but inside competitive sports, it is often the exact pill a player needs to swallow to achieve greatness. Looking at the broader team context, Indiana's leadership core faces a monumental challenge in how they handle the fallout from this painful loss and the public critique that followed. Coaching staff members must walk a fine line between protecting their star asset from unfair online hate and holding her strictly accountable in film sessions so that bad habits don't become permanent traits. If the staff glosses over defensive lapses or ignores high turnover totals to keep peace inside the locker room, they risk losing the respect of veterans who demand equal accountability across the entire roster. On the other hand, if they join in on the public teardown without providing proper structural adjustments on the court, they risk breaking the trust and confidence of a young star who is already dealing with immense external pressure. Navigating this emotional tightrope requires elite coaching management, clear communication, and an unwavering commitment to building a culture based on mutual trust, hard work, and shared responsibility. The way Indiana responds in their very next practice session will reveal a lot about the true character and leadership inside that building. As the season progresses, opponents will undoubtedly continue to test Indiana's toughness, watching closely to see if Stephanie White's words got under their skin or if it motivated them to come back stronger. The Minnesota Lynx provided a complete roadmap on how to make Indiana look human, showing that if you hit hard, double early, and refuse to let their primary ball handler get comfortable, you can control the tempo from start to finish. Other teams around the league are already studying that footage, taking notes on how to deny catches, disrupt passing angles, and exploit Indiana's slow defensive rotations in transition. Indiana cannot afford to sit back and hope teams miss shots. They have to proactively adjust their offensive spacing, set harder screens, and bring a far higher level of physical intensity to match what opponents are throwing at them. The pro game is an relentless arms race